I like to start by taking the mold off the wax paper. You're going to rip some of the wax paper up when you do this. That's okay. We're going to throw this wax paper away. And then what I do is I go around and I pull off all the big pieces of plastic resin and foam that have pulled up on the bottom of the mold, like that. And just go around and pull them all off, because you don't want these to interfere with pulling the rock out of the mold. Some of them will be stuck pretty good, but just give them a gentle tug and they'll come off. You want to be careful, because when you're pulling these big lumps off, you want to be sure that you don't pull off any of the latex material that makes up the mold. Okay, and then once you've got all the lumps pulled off the bottom, turn the mold back over. And then what I like to do is just pull on the edge a little bit, and that will separate the edge from the rocks. And this is also a good way to gauge whether or not the rock is ready to come out of the mold. If you pull the edge a little bit and the foam and resin kind of stretches with it, it's probably a little too early and you need to let it cure for a few more minutes. But this is coming off nicely. I don't know if you can see it, but when I pull on the edge of the latex, it's coming off real nicely. And then once you've got a little bit of the edge off, you can then turn it over and start pulling the mold off of the rock. And one technique that I like to do that works for me is I'll put one finger on the latex here and a couple fingers on the actual rock, and then I'll just sort of pull along the edge, and that kind of keeps you from pulling too hard and tearing up the rocks. Now, you may tear the rocks while you're taking off the mold, but that's okay, as long as it's nothing big. And even if it is something big, the rock is still usable. But this is coming off pretty nicely. Alright, now all the edges are off, so now comes the easy part. Now, you just pull it right off. And it should come off nice and easy, just like that. And there we go. Now we've got our rock all ready to put inside the tunnel. So let's go ahead, get the hot glue gun ready, and put this rock inside the tunnel. Okay, I've got my rock here, and I'm going to line the interior of the tunnel with this rock. Now there are two ways to do this. You can either go horizontally like this, or you can go vertically like this. I like to go horizontally, but you can do whatever you want. Now, putting the rock in this tunnel is sort of like putting together a big puzzle. There's two phases. There's the big pieces, like this, that we're going to put in, and then there's filling in all the gaps, because remember, we're going to make a whole bunch of rock molds and put them all in here, and you're going to end up with a lot of gaps between the pieces of rock. And so after you've put in the big pieces, then you come back and you use your scraps and you tear off little pieces off of these things and fill in the gaps. And like I said, it's a lot like putting together a big puzzle, except you're using hot glue. So what we're going to do, with a pair of scissors, I'm going to cut a straight edge right here to line up with the edge of the tunnel, and then I'm going to glue this in place. Now what I like to do is, instead of gluing the entire piece all in one section, I cut it in pieces. And the reason I do that is because the hot glue gun cannot put out enough hot glue to coat this entire piece fast enough to get it onto the interior of the tunnel before the glue dries. So you need to cut it in several sections, put the hot glue on, put one section on, and then do the next section and the next section and the next section. So I've cut this little piece off, and I'm going to fit it right about here. So what I'll do is, with my scissors, I'm going to cut a straight edge. Like that. And it doesn't have to be exact, because we're going to be filling in gaps all over the place on this tunnel. So if there are any gaps or any inconsistencies, we can fill those in later with scraps. Don't throw away these scraps when you cut pieces off. You will use every little scrap. Yeah, that'll fit nicely right there. So now what I'll do is take my hot glue gun and just cover it with hot glue. Make sure to get the edges. That's the most important place. Get the edges and then get a good coverage in the middle. And you're going to go through plenty of hot glue when you're doing this. A big piece of rock like the one we just made, you'll probably go through 4 to 6 sticks of glue. And big sticks. I don't mean those little sticks, I mean these big sticks. So you're going to need a lot of hot glue. Okay, that looks good. So now I'll just bring it up here. Kind of slide it in place. And then just press it in. And that's how it goes. So now I'm just going to cut off another section. And keep on going. This will go right here. And I'm doing this to show you that normally this would go right here. That's where it was on that section of rock that we made. But you can use it any way you want. I'm going to use it right here. Like I said, it's like putting together a big puzzle. The pieces can really go anywhere you want as long as the end result is a nice looking piece of rock. Okay, I've got these 3 big sections in here now. So now I'm going to demonstrate the second part of tunnel making here, where we're going to fill in the gaps. You see there's a little gap here, there's some up here, there's a gap there. Well, here's the rest of that piece of rock that we made. And all I'll do is just tear it apart and sort of just fill in the gaps where I can. Just cut them to fit. And the nice thing about this rock material is that when you heat it up, when the hot glue touches it, it sort of softens it up again, and it gets really bendable and really malleable, and it'll kind of conform to wherever you put it. So you see I'm just going to fill in that gap there, and I'll tear off some more. I'll use that down here. And this is where you can really start to see what I'm talking about when I'm saying that it's like putting together a puzzle. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that as time goes by, this rock material gets more and more hard, and it gets harder to bend into shape. And like I said, when you put the hot glue on it, it'll soften it up a little bit. But if you ever get to the point where it's become brittle, like let's say the wife or your parents ask you to go do something and you come back and it's totally brittle, you can soften it up again temporarily using a heat gun. I bought a little $79 heat gun at Home Depot, and if I have to run away and leave some rock undone, I'll come back and use the heat gun, soften it up for a minute, and then put it in place. One nice thing about doing this rock scenery is that the rock is much more forgiving than you think. A lot of times you'll be doing this and you'll say, oh, that doesn't look right, or this is going to look like crap when it's done. But when you get it all together, you paint it and you scenic it, a lot of the mistakes that you've made disappear and are never seen again. And you'll never see them again either, even if you try to find them later. Rock scenery is very forgiving. Okay, I've used up all of that rock that we just made. I've put some big sections in, and I filled in all the gaps in between, and it's looking pretty nice. And now we're just going to keep doing the exact same thing all the way down the entire length of the tunnel.